let's talk about the spending multiplier. The spending multiplier is the formula that we use to determine how changes in aggregate demand can have a larger impact on the real GDP than the initial change in spending. So let me remind you that aggregate demand is any form of spending in the C plus IG plus G plus XN categories. Any spending in any of those four is going to equal the change in spending. Some materials might say the change in initial spending. Some might just say the change in spending. They both mean the same thing. The change in spending will have an exponential impact on the real GDP greater than the original change. And the reason why is because when you spend money, let's say you go to Starbucks and spend $4 on a cup of coffee, that has a larger impact than just that isolated transaction of $4. The people working there are then going to have an income because of your purchase. They're then going to go to different businesses and spend that money. They're going to go to places like Target and spend that money, McDonald's and spend that money, CVS and spend that money, the Red Sox game and spend that money. Then all the people working at those businesses are going to have an income and they're going to go live their lives and buy clothes and food and different services like, Netflix and so on and so forth. All of those businesses have employees that are then going to do that too. So that's one chain of multiplication. Don't forget that the businesses are also taking in some of your $4 as well. Starbucks is going to put that into their company. Then Target, CVS, they're going to put it in their companies and so on and so forth. So a simple purchase actually has a much larger impact upon the real GDP because of those multiplied pathways that your money is going to take. So the spending multiplier formula is an important formula that you need to commit to memory, and it's right here, 1 over the MPS. If we know a country's marginal propensity to save, we can determine what that country's multiplier effect of your little purchase of $4 is going to have upon the GDP. And may I also add that it is a maximum potential impact on GDP. No one requires anybody to spend their money in this country on certain things. So while it might look like that could be the change in GDP on paper, we don't know if all of those individuals who work at those companies are then going to go spend their money. If they do, then this would be the impact it would have on the GDP. But if somebody who's working at Target decides to take that money and put it into savings and not spend it, we won't see a multiplier of that dollar amount in reality. So just keep that in mind that you're typically going to see questions that say things like the maximum potential impact on the GDP. So now that we've written this down, the spending multiplier equals 1 over the MPS. What if you don't have the MPS? Then what? Then you have to think about maybe you have the marginal propensity to consume. So because these add up to 1, if you have the marginal propensity to consume, you also can calculate this number. You just have to subtract it from 1. Okay? So the MPC and the MPS add up to 1. So the most common examples that you are going to get on an AP exam, because you can't use a calculator and you have to do this on paper, you're going to get these 3. So I'm going to lay these out for you. You're usually going to get 0.9, 0.8, or 0.75. And it's pretty easy to see the difference or the sum that would add up to 1 for all 3 of these. So these are the 3 most common, again, because you're going to do this on paper with no calculator: 0.9 and 0.1, 0.8 and 0.2, 0.75 and 0.25. Then those turn into your spending multipliers. So you're going to plug that into the formula we have up here. So what that means is that 1 over 0.1 is the same as 1 over 1/10. To divide by a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal. So that really equals 1 times 10 over 1, which is going to come out to be 10. The next one is going to be 1 over 0.2, which is 1 over 2/10, which is going to come out to be 5. The last one is 1 over 0.25, which is the same as 1 over 1/4, which is going to come out to be, 4. So these are your three most common spending multipliers. So if you get one that isn't 10, 5, or 4, you might have taken a wrong path. How do we determine the change in GDP? The change in GDP equals the change in spending times the spending multiplier. So let's say you spent that $4 on a cup of coffee, and we lived in an economy with a marginal propensity to save of 0.2, then that means our spending multiplier would be 5. So that means that the change in GDP equals a maximum potential change of $20.